Hello, welcome to a little paint along with me, Sean from Billy Goat Gaming. Long time since I've done a video. May try and get a few more videos out, but I'm basically having a bit of a refresh of my Peter Pig Sudan figures for Patrols in the Sudan. When I originally bought these, I painted them in the sort of slightly later, I think post 1885 khaki uniform. I was never really happy with it. So what I'm doing is giving them a refresh and painting them in the red, which I just think looks far more striking on the tabletop. So I've got a few sections of these to do. I've got about an hour spare, so I thought, why not jump on and get some of these done. So it really is a case of just painting directly over the khaki that I painted probably, oh crikey, well, I played with these figures at my old house, and I've been in this house 12 years, so probably around 14 years ago, and these will have received the dip. So the sensible thing would be to matte varnish them a bit more, but which would allow this red to adhere a little bit better, but I'm not going to do that because it's all about speed. They still need to look nice, but it's all about speed. So I'm literally, this is paint straight out of the pot, straight onto the figure. As you can see, this is a Coat d'Arms red. I think that's what it's called, red, not demon red or bloody red, just red, which is what it is. So I was quite often, I thought I'd use this chance just to sort of catch up and say where I am in the hobby, because this year has probably been a little bit lax in hobby effort, entertainment. No particular dramas as to why that is, just how it is. And I've done very little Peter Pig gaming, which has been a real shame. Now, time has been one issue because my daughter's very busy on a weekend, and I do like to be able to support her in her weekend activities. Plus, I work a lot of weekends, or I did. That has changed, which is great. And also, a lot of my piggy activity centres around trips down south to see the Peter Pig team, Martin, and the rest of the Weymouth and South Coast gang. And with the cost of fuel at the minute, it makes it an expensive trip. Prior to the current rise in fuel prices, just by the way, this casualties that I'm going to be mounting these on pennies, or no, MDF actually. I'm going to stop using pennies because they can lead to a rubbing off of the paint. Yes, so prior to the current fuel situation, A trip down to Weymouth would cost me around about £65–70. That's driving there and back. It's about a 420-mile round trip, which wasn't particularly a problem. I really enjoyed my trips down to the south coast to see the team. But with current fuel prices, that's over £100 now. So I was considering that was just a little too expensive. However, it's between the devil and the deep blue sea, because I do enjoy those trips and I get a lot out of them. And it really helps me with my hobby. So, maybe not as many as I used to do, but I'm going to be reinstating them. And my first trip is coming up in about a month's time. Down to see Martin, and I can't remember if it's Vietnam or English Civil War, but we're going to be playing one of the two. I think it might be Vietnam. A battle day at Entoyment, so I'll be staying with Martin, having a couple of games down there, which would be great. So, yes, regarding this sort of hobby hiatus, as it were, I seem to have found my way out of the funk. And started painting figures again, which is great, because I've got a lot of figures to paint. And I've also sort of made a mini commitment to myself that I'm going to try and play with each collection I've got of the Peter Pig figures at least once a year. Now, it might not sound a lot, but some of the collections I haven't played with for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And that irks me somewhat, because I put a lot of effort into building and painting these armies, not to mention money into buying the figures, and then for whatever reason don't get them out on the tabletop very much. So my challenge for the next 12 months, so from now through till next July, will be to play with each collection at least once during that time. Now, I've already made a start on that, because we started a small English Civil War campaign at the Stoke Club, using the very old, I think it's sort of a mid-70s published board game called, appropriately enough, the English Civil War. I do apologise, this is a little bit windy. My door is just banging too, so I've just sorted that out. Today is the 18th of July, and it's very hot, forecasted for hitting 40 degrees. I think it's probably mid-30s at the moment where I am in Shropshire, on the Shropshire-Staffordshire border. So yeah, that aim is then to make a bit more use of these lovely figures that I've got. I haven't been doing enough of. So each collection will hit the table once. So let's go in chronological order, era order. And as it stands at the moment, I've got some ancient figures for Conquerors and Kings, which I'm seriously tempted to rebase into a successor army for Conquerors and Kings, but that's not ready yet, so I'm not going to count that. So Conquerors and Kings is Peter Pig's ancient rule set, which is been rewritten currently, so I won't include that. But in chronological order then, so there's Vikings. I've got a Viking, or sorry, a Danish, and a Saxon army for that game. Interestingly enough, it looks like Martin is currently designing some Carolingians or Franks to provide a dedicated mounted force for longships, Wrath of the Vikings, which is a force I've never used in Wrath of the Vikings, but will be adding probably to my Christmas card list. So that will be one. And moving forward, we come to the Middle Ages and the medieval period, or late medieval period, and the Wars of the Roses using Bloody Barons. So last year I attended the Bosworth Battle Day, which was very good. Probably around about this time of year, actually, maybe a little earlier. So Wars of the Roses will hit the table. I think I've got enough for 2 armies. I've certainly got 1 because I did provide figures for the Lancastrian army for Bosworth. And I've certainly got unpainted lead. Enough unpainted lead to make up the 2 armies. Whether or not the paint that I've got enough painted, not quite sure. But yes, so that will happen. Then I suppose chronologically we're looking at the Battles in the Age of War, the samurai rules. Now I've got figures, and I've got a little bit of it painted, but they were one of the armies that I lost rather carelessly probably 3 years ago now. So I've got some of the figures to replace them, but not all. So that one will have to be on the back burner, and if at all, it will be next year, and possibly the last one that I get round to. So I've actually got the collection ready for that, so it shouldn't really count, but I'd like to think that I'll be able to get back to that at some point in the near future. So what's after Samurai? I suppose English Civil War. So that's already underway with a campaign started at the club, and we started the battle on Friday. It's a bit late when we started it because we're using the board game to generate the on-table situation, if you like, which went very well, I have to say, and players seem to enjoy the campaign aspect. So that one is really ticked off, although it looks like I may be playing that at another battle day as well down in Weymouth. So multiple plays is fine. That's very good, actually. But then from the English Civil War, so mid-1600s, mid-17th century, moving to the 18th century, and we're talking about the American War of Independence. And I've got the 2 armies ready for that. I've got a few bits and pieces still to finish, but I've certainly got enough to field 2 armies for the basic game there. And Washington's Army is a game that I very much enjoy. I actually enjoy playing the historical battles just as much as the sort of pick-up game. And that was probably the last time I used Happy to Pick figures at home, when I played Aid from my club, and we played Guildford Courthouse. And again, I think that was round about this time last year. I think something came up on my social media to say that that was the case. So, War of Independence, yeah. So, moving on from War of Independence, we move into the 19th century, and I think it's fast forward to the American the American Civil War. And I've got absolute tons of American Civil War to play. Now, there was a battle day for this 2 or 3 weekends ago, which I couldn't make. It looks like the guys had a good time and all. The usual rules, queries and questions and interpretations cropped up there that we always seem to have, because we don't play these rules often enough to stick on our mind, and I think we get a lot of cross-fertilization between one set of rules and the next, which is understandable, really, not least because we're all getting on a bit. So 1861 to 1865 for the War of Independence, for the American Civil War. And following that, we reach the Sudan, which I'm doing now. So I have a British infantry army. It's actually probably a platoon. I think the units are referred to as sections. So you basically got a platoon, reinforced platoon, going out into the desert on a mission, led by an officer and probably a couple of sergeants. So I have the British, which I'm currently repainting, or tarting up, probably is the better way of looking at it. And I have a Fuzzy Wuzzy, or Hadendower force. But I've always wanted, and never got round to it, the Dervish, wearing the skull caps and the white cloth coats, or how would you describe it? I know it's got a word, and I think it begins with J. Anyway, you know, the one with the coloured patches on it. I've always wanted one, but always wanted a force of them, but never got round to it. So I've bitten the bullet and ordered one this week. Hence wanting to paint these and get these into sort of a more satisfactory state, more relevant to the earlier part of the Saddam. So the relief column that went to try and save Gordon obviously ended in failure. So I've ordered enough troops for a Dervish army, including a unit of camel riders, which you can do within the rules. And I think also they come with a gun. So that'll be nice. So there you go. That's Patrols in the Sudan, which is 1880s. So jumping forward again, we come to the First World War and square bashing. And I've had a love affair with square bashing for a very long time. I've just realised I've missed 2 out. I'll come back to those shortly. So square bashing. Now this is an interesting one, because I'm talking about playing once with each collection. And what I mean is actually once with each set of rules. But I've got 6 armies for square bashing. So I've got early and late war, British, French and German. So I'll have a think about how I'm going to do that. I have in mind a conversion of a Great War Spearhead rule set scenario for the Battle of the Somme, centered around Tipval. But also there's a very good Mons scenario, and I'm thinking how I might be able to convert that to square bashing, because they are essentially the same level of command, both rule sets. So I need to look how I can convert those. So that's square bashing. The two I'd forgotten are AWI riverine warfare, or naval, using hammering iron, and that is a very easy one to get out and have a go at. I'm still missing a couple of ships from that collection, so I need to have a look and see what it is I'm missing, because I'd really like to complete that collection. There's also some lovely 3D printed ships coming onto the market, which I must find a supplier of and get. So that's an easy one to do. Then there's Pieces of 8 with all those pirate ships I painted last year, and get that to the table again, because that is a rather fun game for an evening's entertainment. I haven't yet got what I need for the land raid side of that game, but technically this challenge or project is about getting on the table things I've already got. So although that may feature later in the year, I will come around to that in due course. So those are the two I missed. So, okay, moving on then from the First World War, and actually contemporary to the First World War, we have the Mexican Revolution, which is my new secret passion. I have the government Federalista army almost finished painting, nearly done, not far off now. If an army can ever be finished, obviously that's an argument for another day, or discussion for another day, but they are pretty close to table ready. Let's call it that, table ready. So I've got a force ready to put on the table. There's always going to be additions that I could do with adding. And as part of my birthday treat to myself, I'll be adding the Pancho Villa even boxed army that Peter Pig have just put on sale for a limited time only. So grab it while you can. Which is a nearly all mounted raiding force. So all mounted ballistas, I think they were colloquially known as. So that's part of my birthday, present to myself, which I'll be collecting in August. So with some dedicated painting time, let's say August, September, probably looking at October, I guess, for a game of that. If I can find a nice quick way to get them painted and onto the table. So that's 1910 to 1920, then we move into the 1930s and the Spanish Civil War, and that is all but ready to go. I have my anarchist militia and a regular army of nationalists to go against them. I really need to add some Moroccans to that, to be honest. So at what point in the schedule I go for the Spanish Civil War, bayonets and ideology, I don't know. If I do decide to just add in a Moroccan contingent, which I think I probably should do to make it a little bit more historical, then I will delay the game of bayonet and ideology until probably next year. Although these things change over time, desires for these things change over time, so we'll see how that goes. But that's Spanish Civil War, so that takes us up to the Second World War. Now, PBI, which is the Peter Pig game of choice, is being rewritten at the moment alongside Conquerors and Kings. So it could be that the game consists of a playtest of the new version, or it could be I just use the old set. Either way, that's entirely ready to go with. I've got Germans, Russians and Americans for that. I think I'll probably go with the Americans against the Germans, as it was my first PBI army and I haven't used those for some time. The Russians have certainly seen more use in recent years. Okay, so that's the Second World War. Then let's move up to the 70s, shall we, or 60s and 70s, and we've got Vietnam. So there's a Vietnam game day coming up. I think it's September. I'm just slightly struggling to get to that because, although I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm no longer working shifts, so I have every weekend off, which is great. But my wife does still work weekends. And with an 11-year-old daughter, then it does mean that one of us does have to be around. So as it stands at the moment, my wife's work is just precluding me from going to that, although I think maybe I'll sort something out. So that's Vietnam. And I have VC and MVA to go against the Americans. Now, some plans for Vietnam using Men of Company B. I've long had a desire to design a game based around Hue. So that's on the cards, and Timecast Miniatures sell some beautiful sort of French colonial buildings which would work ideal in that setting. So and Timecast are looking to close up shop, and I think this selling the business, so I need to make the decision relatively quickly to stock up on the buildings that I need for that. But also they do the a firebase collection of earthworks and bunkers, etc. So I really need to crack on and decide what I'm going to do there, because I would like to play the Tour of Duty campaign that I wrote for the Peter Pig in-house magazine, The Mill, and that's essentially a series of 5 games that you play as the American player, one of which has to be a firebase game, and one of which has to be an NBA game, and then 3 games versus the VC. So that would be nice to get a firebase to play that game. So that's Vietnam, and then moving forward again, we come to AK-47. Obviously ran the game day for that last October, which went down quite well, I think. I think people rather enjoyed it. Confession time, I lost the results somehow. I don't quite know how that happened, but so I couldn't actually publish the results of it, other than to say that the Rebels won overall. But it was a good day, a good game, and there seems to be a real resurgence of interest in AK-47 in actual both forms. But it's nice to see that Reloaded is getting equal attention, principally through the likes of Julian and Jimmy, both from the Facebook group and the RFCM forum, but also the original set of rules as well, which are very good. So yes, very simple matter to get them out. I've made a load of buildings for AK for sort of the inner city area, using MDF buildings. That was great fun to do, and I've got lots and lots of AK-47 to use and play with, and have all the options that you need to choose an army. So there you go. That's quite an undertaking, particularly now I've said it out loud and I've said it on video, which brings its own challenges. So now I'm sort of committing to it in public. But I think what it will do will refocus me to actually not just paint and collect these figures, but to play with them, because I always say I paint to play and not display. But I've been doing a lot of playing lately, and there's certainly no displaying because they just get put in a box and ignored. I've got other projects and other scales. I've got some 10mm on the go. I've got 6mm projects that I want to do, and I've also got sci-fi and fantasy projects that I want to do. So there's lots of competition for time for my hobby time, and I think you just have to really go with the flow and not try and force the issue too much. Just pick up the ball and run with it when inspiration strikes. So that's what I've tended to do of late. So I've painted quite a bit of 10mm over the last few months. Not much 6mm actually, a little bit of fantasy maybe. And also actually a lot of 28mm bolt action figures for two guys at the club who don't paint, and wouldn't be able to get painted figures on the table if I hadn't offered to paint for them. Now, I'm not a commissioned painter by any stretch of the imagination, and there are far better purveyors of painting figures than me, but I think the price I charge is commensurate with the quality of paint job they're getting. I think they're decent tabletop standard. I don't think there's any question about that, but they aren't award-winning figures. So I'd say I've probably painted more 28mm this year than I have in 10 years or more. But what it has done actually is made me want to paint some more World War II because I think I've always been a little bit scared of painting World War II because never really quite sure what's the exact right colour to paint a British tank or an American tank, or what colour webbing do I need to paint these British infantry. So I think I've got over that little mental block just through bits of research. I've also taught myself how to apply decals, which I've never done before, not to any volume or standard. So I'm quite looking forward to adding some decals to some of the vehicles I've got. I don't have an awfully big collection of tanks and vehicles for World War II, but I do have some, and they would most definitely benefit from the addition of the odd decal here and there. So I'm looking forward to revisiting that range, particularly the Americans, as I've said, because I've painted, or I'm in the process of painting, American Army for Jeff at the club. So there's lots happening at the moment and lots of inspiration, and I think because I've managed to get away from shifts at work and back into a Monday to Friday role, I'm really hoping my productivity is going to increase because I'll have more time in the evenings. I'll hopefully be fresher in the evenings than I normally am when I work shifts. And even if it's only half an hour, a bit like Simon Parsons on the RFCM group, he talks about just even doing half an hour a night over the course of a week. That really can add up to achieving substantial gains over the course of a week, over a month, over a few months, where ordinarily you might think to yourself, well, I haven't got time, so I won't paint the figures. 6 months later, you haven't painted anything. But if you take the attitude that I'll try just half an hour a night, even if it was only for 3 or 4 nights a week, or averaging that over the course of a week, 6 months later, that's a lot of painting that you've got done. And regardless to what level you paint figures, whether it's a quick slap dash and wash like my style, or you're somebody who takes great care over the detail and shading and highlighting, etc., you're going to get a damn sight more done doing half an hour a night than not making a start at all. So that's a real good philosophy to follow, I think. Okay, so you can see I've made quite a good progress just dotting the red coats onto these British infantry. Some of the first figures on my blog, which is now 14 years old, were these figures. So these are real veterans, and these have been used on and off quite a lot. Probably, I say quite a lot, probably a dozen games, which for me is quite a lot. Certainly amongst the figures that I've used the most in my collection, amongst what else would be in that category? Probably my PBI Americans, and possibly my early war square bashing British and Germans. I would suggest they've probably seen the most action over the years. But I've got a posse for Western, which I think I've played a grand total of 2 games with, both at the Weymouth Weekender. That's haven't used very much. So the Nationalists for the Spanish Civil War, they've never been used. Technically not quite finished, that I've still got to flock the base, so I'll give myself a mulligan there and say they're not finished when they really are. You could use them as they are. My Anarchists for the Spanish Civil War, which is an army I absolutely adore, I'll probably use twice. I call them Anarchists because that's the list I've built with them, but they could be used as any militia group, and in fact could probably be used for International Brigade as well. I went through my Spanish Civil War collection the other day. I got an absolute mass of them. I've got far more tanks than I'll ever need. I've got aircraft, I've got limbers. Again, most of that has never actually seen my tabletop. They may have seen the tabletop of the guy I bought most of the tanks and aircraft off, but the tanks certainly haven't hit my tabletop. And this is what I mean about making use of these figures. They're lovely vehicles and tanks, but they're just sat in a cupboard for an inordinate length of time doing nothing. But hopefully this year that will change. So that is the challenge, guys. I'm going to finish the coats on these and probably just wrap this video up. Next stage, for anybody interested, is the blue trousers. Then just touching up the webbing and the hat with I think it's called linen, the paint that I'm using for that from Coat d'Arms. And really, the blanket roll at the back is grey, so I'll do that. And then a wash with soft tone from Army Painter, and that is jobs are good. When I talk about slapping paint onto these figures, that's what I mean, really. That take care to stay in the lines for the most part. I don't often go back and repair where I've slipped, because invariably you will never ever notice. And then the wash is the final piece of the jigsaw. A lot of people will go in and re-highlight, but I never have done that. I've been tempted to do it occasionally if I think the wash has actually dulled the figure down just too much. But in all honesty, not very often. Not very often have I gone in and added a highlight. And again, another thought was perhaps just to push myself a bit more with painting and see how good could I do these if I went in and did the highlighting afterwards, and added that extra bit of detail. But I'll tell you what, generally I think life is too short, because from a game distance the figures look absolutely fine as they are. And I'm not that fussy. You might say, well, I'm being fussy here because I'm essentially repainting this British army, but it's always niggled me a little bit that I'd taken the choice to paint them in the khaki when really, historically, they would still be in the red, and also aesthetically, the red just looks so much better than the khaki on the tabletop. And also they're my figures, so I'll paint them how I like to paint them. So yeah, it's always niggled me a little bit. Whenever I've had the figures out on the table and played a game, I've always secretly wished to myself that I'd painted them in the red. I know Martin's figures for patrols in the Sudan are in red. Certainly the majority of them, if not all. Les has got a collection. I think he's actually, I don't know if he's got British foot. He's certainly got a very nice camel core, so I do have a little bit of camel core which I'm working on, and initially I will just have it as a section of camel core to accompany the patrol out into the Sudan. Technically in the rules you shouldn't mix force types, but again, it's my rules, my game, so I will do that. But I'd like to have a full faction of camel core, and so that will come. There we go. So that's all the red coats done. Now there's just the 2 artillery crews here, which we'll do in blue. I think this is right. So they'll be in blue tunics and trousers. I suspect when they went to khaki, then, not as I painted here, the artillery crews would have worn khaki as well, but again, it just looks, to my eye, it just adds that bit of colour, although khaki was prevalent in the later part of the Sudan. I think my company that I've painted here will look rather resplendent in more colourful blue for the artillery crew and red for the infantry. By putting this will annoy some people I know who are far more accomplished painters than me, because they might say, well, you're obscuring some detail, or you should have stripped the figures first. I'll try and keep this in camera shot. You should have stripped the figures first, and that's possibly true. But this Coat d'Armes paints, I've as well as Army Painter, I really do like them because they are quite thin paints. And although this will sound, I don't know, this sounds odd to me, the paint stays where you put it, or it goes where you put it. By that I mean it does cover well, although it is a thin paint. And also the webbing, pouches, etc. I've obviously left because that was all the same colour. So the khaki is acting as basically the undercoat. These figures, and it really is quite an easy task just to fill in the space in between the webbing. The intention then with this challenge to play all these games is to post more on the Billy Goat channel. I'm not promising any sort of really regular release schedule, but as and when, certainly not to leave it 10 months in between videos, but to have some battle reports on here, maybe some bits of news, maybe another interview or chat with Martin. That would be nice to catch up. Maybe a chat with some of the other guys down south, or Julian or Jimmy regarding the AK scene. And also the Buckets of Dice blog, to get that back. So there's a couple of posts on there now to sort of resurrect it. And that's detailing the post I put on today is detailing that English Civil War game using Regiment of Foot, which is jolly good fun. I'll see if I can link each of these videos onto the blog, so it can be sort of a central repository, I suppose, for the content I'm creating. I'm trying to ease back on the amount of content I do create, because although moving to a far more sociable work pattern, with Ava's activities and other bits and pieces going on, it's difficult to overcommit to some of these things. So if I could move to a more ad hoc schedule of release, it might affect viewers, but that's fine. It's a fairly narrow target audience in any case. It might be, it will create, I think, promote more creativity from me, let's say that much, because I haven't got the stress or the pressure to keep providing content which might not be of complete interest to myself. So Billy Goat may expand out into one or two other non-Peter Pig areas, but will invariably be concentrated on Peter Pig content, because there isn't a lot of it out there. I think Alex at Storm of Steel said there's nothing out there at the moment for PBI. It's great to see he's done a video playing PBI, and I think he's got another one coming. It should be really good to see. But we are about done. There we go. It is hotter than hell, as they say. But there we go. So let's just show you in the course of an hour. I managed to add the red coats to all of these and the blue coats to a couple of artillery crews in 56 minutes, just while I'm chatting on it to you. So it does show that a little and often can pay dividends. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'll catch up with you soon. Stay safe, play nice. More soon.